Our next guest is Marion J. Riggs. He's the founder of Loving Mind Institute. Marion works with those struggling with addiction, and wow, that is such an important topic right now, Bobby, with what's happening with the opioid crisis.
Absolutely.
So welcome to the show. Tell us more about your work.
Yeah, so I'm excited to be here, and it's a very important topic. So I'd like to discuss how I got involved in this cause, and this cause actually goes way back to when I was 17. So, and then it's been a long journey ever since. And so there's been periods where, overall, I'd like to discuss about the trouble with the treatment industry, the past historical failures. So as I was saying, when I was 17 years old, I was in a treatment program called Straight Incorporated. And this treatment center did their best at that time.
Can you tell us more about what was a little bit background?
Sure. So
What got you there?
So that's the striking thing, is what got me there was not much. So this is one of the problems with the treatment industry, is that something like Straight Incorporated, it's not the only one back in the 90s. So it started in 73 and it closed down last was 93. Last time that Straight treated somebody was in 1993. So I was in there in 1991 at 17. And so I smoked pot, and I smoked a little bit of pot, but my family was a Jerry Falwell, Reagan loving family, and they said, "Oh my God, my son's he's gonna die," and so they put me in Straight. But the problem with treatment programs like Straight adolescent treatment centers is that they can't run well on the extremes. They have to go to the center, and people that necessarily don't have addiction we're put in these places. And so anyway, so that's how I got tied to this cause. And so it's a long...
Wait, I'm sorry, you said people who aren't addicted are put into the treatment centers?
Yes, all the time. All the time.
So in your case, it was just your parents' judgment that they felt you needed the treatment?
That's right. And so unfortunately, I can't cover all of that today. Right. But that starts with how this journey began for me, and what being in my eyes, being aware.
Tell us about your work now.
Yes, and so, but what made me aware, what being in there made me aware, is all the ways that we're getting things wrong now, and in many ways that we're getting things wrong. So, so I overcame addiction in my late 20s. So, being in a place like Straight, they'll stigmatize you, label you, and do a lot of things that you carry on with you when you leave there. So, I overcame addiction, and then went on and then changed my course of life, so which is a big success story. And from there, I entered grad school, got a Ph.D., and now I'm doing a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard Medical School. So yes, it's a lot to try to get into.
So what exactly is the Loving Mind Institute?
Loving Mind Institute is, the mission of Loving Mind Institute is advanced biomedical research for scientific initiatives for mental illness and addiction. And so my heart goes out to those with addiction, because I'm tied to the cause. I understand addiction, what it's like to be imprisoned by addiction, and then to overcome it. But in our view, we see addiction as a biopsychosocial disease. And so, and our center is the biological aspects of it, and how can we address the biological aspects of it, and as well as mental illness. So,
that's interesting though, because what you just said was very complicated. How when you're looking at the biological aspect of it, are you divorcing it from the bigger complex of where someone exists, their community, their family, their workplace, their place of worship? I mean, have we compartmentalized things, and is that part of the problem why we're not effective about treating addiction? my
I don't think we're addressing the biological aspects of it very well. So we know that my community speak is going to be strongest in addiction, because I've been there, and my heart goes out to those with mental illness, and I identify with them as well. So I'm just as passionate about supporting research for mental illness as well. And the lab I'm in actually studies mental illness and is making great progress using patient-based approaches like stem cells. And that's how I got into nonprofit work, was through stem cell advocacy. So I'm a huge grassroots advocate for stem cell biology and how we can use this to understand the various factors of mental illness. I would like to see what we're doing in the lab for mental illness also done for addiction, and we aren't doing it for addiction. The problem with doing work on just mice is that you cure a mouse, but doesn't translate to the humans.
it's such a different
but-
context.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I
Yeah.
think that
And
because it
so
seems like right
it's
now
critical.
our criminal justice system treats addiction more as a crime as opposed to mental illness. So do you work
Exactly.
with our prison systems and our incarceration systems to
Well,
to
I've gone out
go
and
through that
spoke. I've gone out and
process?
spoke to those
Yeah.
places. But what LMI is focused on is how do we get science behind us? How do we get evidence-based practices behind us? How do we and how what we haven't done, we talk about the social aspects and environmental aspects, that's neutralizing, if you want to use a disease, the illness or disorder, however you want to frame it, biopsychosocial, however you want to say it, you're neutralizing the condition, right? So when somebody has diabetes or cardiac failure, they don't have the issues, it's not really an environmental issue of stigma or lack of social connection or family relationships or whatever it might be, or trauma or whatever might be going on with that. You're neutralizing the condition at that point. You're putting them on par to get help, right? So things like tough love or, what was very, I think, traumatic for many people in straight, treatment through trauma, which was their goal.
Right.
But, it was told to us that we need to break you down because you don't know what a bottom is.
So now, what is
so
the
my-
what is
so
the
where I'm
philosophy
heading
now?
with where I'm
Yeah.
heading with that is that you don't go through those things with other diseases like stigma. So you got to get people at least on par. But once you do that, you're still dealing with somebody who's in a vicious cycle of addiction, and it's a biological basis for that. And if there's a role to get someone to stop the vicious cycle sooner, why take years and decades? Every person who's abused or has addictive illness or has been a person with addiction will tell you they used for many months, years when they didn't no longer wanted to. They no longer wanted to. So it isn't about that they didn't want help. The biggest myth out there is that, well, if they somebody can't get help until they want help. People wanted help for a long time, but they didn't know
They
what
just
to
didn't
do.
know where to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
Well, we thank you so much for your work,
Thank you.
Marion Riggs.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Really
it.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes,
Wish you
make
all the
sure
best.
to check out the Loving Mind Institute.